I see Michael already smiling. He anticipates what I would say. My good friend.
Yeah, and I put my head on a block, and I offer Mr. Brother Bishop the scalpel to cut it off.
The political leader has said several times up to last night that is not a reflection of her personal views or the views of the party. And you understand, George, how elections at the party level work.
So, Dr. Payne, do you have ties? Do you have ties to the National Democratic Congress, Dr. Payne? Or rather, were you commissioned by the NDC to do this poll?
Information because it seems interesting that a lot of your advice is very consistent with what was said. Brilliant.
And Claudette, good luck with everything.
You too, man. May the best candidate win in the town of St. George.
But kill on.
Yes.
You is a young man too, so stop it up. Tell everybody you are a young man too.
We are a people who have always aspired for more. We've always aspired to do better. We've always accepted that not because your mother didn't go to secondary school, you should go. It has always been the other way around. You should aspire.
You've been there for a long time. Want to be Queen of St. Andrews, but yet the problems around you you're not seeing. You can pray yourself out of the problems in St. Andrews.
And if you're not careful with how and what you say on radio, you will cause people to fight here.
I thrive on that controversy. Some people hate it, but I love it. In other words, every time something goes viral, it's about Kem Jones.
Some persons were getting pension after 2 terms in office, right? And the persons that work for 26 years plus not getting anything. It's just unfair.
God is good, and God looks after me. You know, not just my wife is no longer here, so both herself and the father up there are looking after me very, very well indeed.
Not a few people that you pick up by the side of the road to run in an election. These are not people that you mustered up and you pulled together a few months before you think an election is going to call, and you say we want to win an election, so let's come together.
Ambassadorial representation. In the last 2.5 months, the NDC government in St. George's, under Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell, is said to have blown the whistle on the sale of a botched diplomatic passport from an unnamed Polish diplomat who is alleging to have not only paid the award. Said, quote, Grenada has quietly become an in-demand yachting hotspot in recent years, both for the tri-island state and for its place as an easy-to-reach hub for exploring the wonders of the islands of the Grenadians, unquote. We welcome our guests, Dr. David Hines, Associate Professor of Political Science, the Honorable Peter David, the Member of Parliament for the town of St. George, and former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jomo Sanga Thomas, political commentator and former legislator, and Kamal Gray, certified Grenadian yacht technician. And now, here is the Bubb Report's weekly editorial. A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to this weekly edition of the Bubb Report. Now, last week, the Republic of Barbados and its firebrand, progressive and forward-thinking Prime Minister Mia Mottley and her cabinet outlined a new national grooming policy for the island's public and private schools, which will allow students to wear dreadlocks and other cornrow styles without consequence and without the need for covering up their hair. The country, populated by people of mostly African descent, has followed a long-standing policy of hair grooming largely informed by Eurocentric colonialism. In 2020, the Supreme Court in Jamaica agreed with the decision of one of the schools there to ban a student because of her dreadlocks. In 2020, there have also been instances in the English-speaking Caribbean where the wearing of natural hair by employees and black tourists has been viewed as inappropriate and unprofessional. For example, in Barbados in 1986, a hotel employee was dismissed from her job due to wearing her hair in braids. Additionally, Grenadian feminist and civil rights activist, the late great Audre Lorde, in the book Is Your Hair Still Political? Unquote, shared her experience of being denied entry to Virgin Gorda, an island of the British Virgin Islands in the Caribbean, when seeking to spend the Christmas vacation there. She was informed that wearing her natural hair in dreadlocks prohibited her from entering the island at the time in 1986. More recently, in January 2015, the Royal Barbados Police Force revised their dress code policy by placing restrictions on the wearing of natural hairstyles by policewomen and enforcing a ban on wearing dreadlocks in the police force in that island. This mandate was closely followed by an outcry against the principal of a secondary school in Barbados, who allegedly expressed disapproval of natural hairstyles worn by female students. Although anecdotal, these are some examples that demonstrate the challenges that Black women and girls and boys face when wearing their natural hair in mainstream Caribbean society. The discrimination of Black people wearing their natural hair can be traced to the region's history, as it has been argued that due to the transatlantic trafficking and the enslavement of Africans, Black natural hair has consistently been denigrated. In 2023, we believe the time has come for other Caribbean countries to follow Barbados's lead by decolonizing the problematic vestiges of colonialism with respect to how we police African hair. And at this point, I wish to welcome my first guest for this week's program. He is a young man in Grenada. Kamal, if you can turn your camera on for us so that we can see and hear you, that would be good. Are you there, Kamal?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
We are not seeing you. Your camera seems to be off. Yes, I'm not too sure what's happening. So let me have you log out and log back in.
Right.
Yeah, we can't seem to get Kamal there. But viewers and listeners, what we want to do for the very first segment of the program today is to talk about the yachting sector in Grenada, but more specifically to talk about the careers in the yachting sector for young people who might be interested in pursuing yachting and careers in the yachting sector as an alternative. Far too many times we tend to think of particular careers as desirable versus other careers as being undesirable. But what this young man will come and talk about is the fact that he pursued what might be considered unconventional in Grenada, and he's very happy that he actually made that decision. So, Kamal, I believe we can see you now. So, welcome back.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I know that it's your day at the Kingdom Hall, so I thank you for taking the time to spend with us, Kamal.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Absolutely. Now, Kamal, recently Grenada was voted by one of the yachting magazines as the yachting destination of the year. In that article, they speak of the increasing demand for Grenada as a yachting destination. Now, with that particular demand comes the demand for services, yes? And I believe you are probably one of the only local, indigenous, certified yacht technicians on the island. So I would begin by asking you, Kamal, what spurred your interest in getting involved in yachting in the first place? I know that probably your late dad had something to do with that. So talk to us, first of all, about why you had an interest in yachting in the first place.
Well, ever since growing up, I had a mechanical background. Learned mechanics from my dad. We would work on vehicles together, and family vehicles and my personal vehicles when I came to have. And I wanted to pursue a career in engineering. That's my original plan, to be a mechanical engineer. But I never liked the fact that you have to sit in school for years to become an engineer, and then you sit in an office most times. Most jobs would require you to be in an office. So I wanted to do something that was different. And I think in conversation with my dad and making plans, he suggested a marine technician.
Go ahead. I'm here. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm not hearing you.
Oh, you're not hearing me? Let's see what's happening here.
I can see you fine, but I can't hear you fine. I'm not hearing you.
All right, but go ahead. Folks, just stand by again. We're still having some technical issues here with Kamal. Okay, folks, we will try to resume our conversation here with young Kamal. Kamal, if you can turn your camera on again, just go ahead. The internet, probably because you are on data, might drop out from time to time, but please proceed. Okay, but please proceed, Kamal. You said you can't hear me. Okay, Kamal, can you hear me now?
Hello.
Can you hear me now, Kamal?
Yes, I'm hearing you fine now. Thank you.
Okay, all right. But yes, please proceed.
Yes, so in conversations with my dad and my mom and my family, we discuss why not the marine industry.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much people doing it here, and I had a fishing boat, a small fishing boat, where I would go to fish, and we would need technicians. We'd see people wanting technicians.
Mm-hmm.
So I did some research. I found a school in the U.S. and I applied for the school. I got through, traveled there, and I started school in September 2020, right after COVID. So there, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Right. So there, yes, we learned a great deal of marine technician stuff, and I was able to get certified in that field.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us about the demand for. Well, first of all, before we get to that, but you attended University Institute in Florida. Tell us about your experience as a Grenadian student at that institute.
Well, there was a small culture shock coming from a small island into a big country. But I was quickly able to overcome that and made new good friends. School there was, in my opinion, amazing. I miss school. The teachers were very friendly. They were very helpful. Made good friends with the teachers and students because of my accent. It was a challenge for them to understand me sometimes. So I had to slow down my speech and adopt I would say, the American lingo, or increase my articulations in speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So articulation, sorry, in speaking. So it was a challenge in terms of language barrier or understanding, but I made very good friends there with the lecturers and with students. I graduated at one of the top honors in the school in 2021. This is a 1-year program. And from there, I was started out by different companies, and I got hired by one of the largest marine yacht companies in the U.S., where I did some internship and work for a few months.
So fast forward, you're now back in Grenada. You're one of the local indigenous certified marine yacht technicians on the island. For young people who might want to be looking at technical careers, what encouragement and advice would you give them to perhaps look at a career in yachting as an option, as opposed to going off to law, as opposed to studying an art history major or something like that?
So for young persons, I would strongly encourage it. The marine industry is huge. It is not only about mechanical work. I chose mechanics, but there are far more things besides mechanics that a young male or female can do. I can give a list of a few things like yacht surveying. I have a good young friend who is a yacht surveyor. We have HVAC and AC, electrical. If you're into cleaning and detailing, there's that. If you're into fiberglass work, there's that. There's also captaining. You could be a crew member. There's a ton of things you can do. You can do inspections. It's so much to do. There's a lot I could list for the day, on and on the list. So I strongly encourage people, to think about it, because yes, law and being a doctor or psychology, all these jobs are good, but you can actually fit some of these things in the marine industry as well. Maritime law. There's so much things you can do. So I strongly encourage you to look outside the box sometimes and see if there's something in that industry that fits you and fits what you like.
Now talk about the demand for your services on the island, given Grenada's designation as this very important yachting destination in the Southern Caribbean, in the Caribbean in general. I'm sure that there is increased demand for your services. How is that looking?
So since I've been back, my advertisement has been through word of mouth mostly. I have business cards and Instagram and Facebook pages, but the service I provide, people run with it and they talk about it, because we have a need for young technicians in the island. On top of that, certified technicians, because there are technicians here on island who have the experience, but a lot of them are not fully certified. So they would do a job for you, but the level of quality they would do it, from what I have seen, is not on the same level that I would do it as a certified technician. So I've seen a great need. I've spoken to a lot of my clients and a lot of new customers when it comes to having a technician or somebody on standby to do a job for them correctly, quickly, and efficiently. And I think it's going to grow more. It has been increasing this year. January has been very well for me, and this is part of the slow period, you would call it. So I see a great need for young persons like myself and more people to come on board in this industry.
So you're saying that there is a demand there. How are you keeping up to that demand? Are you bringing on extra hands? What are you doing? And where do you get time for yourself? Of course, I know that Sunday is an important day for you, for your faith, but where do you get time to really do all of these jobs that you have that are coming in?
Currently, I am in this year, in 2023, my goal is to employ at least 2 people. I have some other things in the pipeline I wouldn't speak in depth about, but in terms of training persons and having a training program where I could give people a crash course on, doing maintenance on small crafts for personal vessels, or to be able to work with a company to be able to be efficient in that company. So training persons is something that I have very close to me in the near future, a short-term goal. And where do I get time for myself? Because I'm self-employed, it's hard to get time for yourself, because you have to work, you have to be meeting all your customers' demands, and you can't say no sometimes, but sometimes you have to say no. And I schedule. I have a very good schedule. I have very good people supporting me who help me with scheduling, help me with organization, and I try to improve more. I try to read more to organize myself better. And I make time for myself. I enjoy the beaches. I went to the river yesterday. So I do things in my free time. One of my hobbies is spearfishing. So I can sometimes swim out to do that, or I take a boat ride and go somewhere and do it. So I still make time for family and friends when I can. But for the majority of the time, 7 days a week, I'm working.
I understand that you also have an interest in diving. I picked that up in our research.
Yeah. Yeah, so I spearfish for fun. I like to catch, a lot of the local reef fish, just for fun, just to eat home with my friend and I. And it's just beautiful on there. It's similar to snorkeling, but you can go down deeper and swim among the reefs, and it's fun.
Okay. What would you say has been one of the challenges of returning home and setting up shop in Grenada? Do you find as if you received the support that you needed from Grenada with respect to setting up your business? When you tell people what you do as a yacht technician, what kinds of reaction do you get from people? Do they say, what do you mean by yacht technician? Do you get that kind of reaction? Is there a curiosity with what you do?
Setting up shop in Grenada has its challenges. It still does. Apart from registration and all of that, going into the marinas and getting involved in the marinas is a challenge. It's challenging because most marinas would require you to pay a certain amount of money every month to have a spot in the marina to do work, and they're usually not flexible. Now I have one marina friend. I wouldn't name the company, but he has allowed me to work in his marina, helping him with jobs. And I really appreciate that. That gave me a lot of leeway forward to working on catamarans and sailboats and giving him jobs and giving him a good reputation because I'm working in his yard. So it has its ups and downs. I have fine challenges with getting tools and parts here. There's a lot of jobs that I have to redo because people use incorrect tools to do the work in the first place. So I have to order tools and order special tools to do jobs many of the times. So that is a challenge. Support from government. I have reached out for a grant. I'm still waiting on that. I probably did that 4 months ago. So I'm still
Let
waiting
us talk.
on
Let
that,
us talk about. You
grant.
said what specific grant are you talking about? Are we talking about the CES grant? I know that there is a CES grant.
I lost
You're
audio
losing.
again.
You're losing me again.
Not hearing you.
Okay. We talking about. Okay, you're not hearing me. Let's see here. Are you hearing me now? Okay, you might have to log off and log back on again. Okay, so we will continue here with Kamal. He's a young man who's gotten into the yachting sector. He's a certified yacht technician, and he also shared with me that he not only works on yachts, but he works on other. He's certified to provide services for other marine craft, and we're talking about, as he said, catamarans. We're talking about the inter-island boats that ply the islands. So he's not only involved in yachting. And so the reason why we wanted to feature this young man is because he has pursued what is considered a quote unquote non-traditional career, but a career that is considered under the rubric of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it is always good to see young people like that getting involved in careers like that and really meeting a particular need that is in demand in Grenada. So let's see if we can get Kamal back here. Kamal, can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Yes. So yes. We were talking. The question I was going to ask you was about the grant. Can you talk about the specific grant that you applied for?
That is the COVID relief fund grant, the CES.
The CES grant.
Right. So yes, I applied for that grant early in the stages. In order to buy tools to expand my business. But I've yet to hear any feedback. I've been calling and visiting, and they keep saying, yes, it's in processing, and we'll get back to you. We'll call you tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. So I'm still here waiting in 2023 now, and I'm planning to go down there tomorrow or maybe Tuesday talk to them and see what's going on, to see if I get any more feedback from them.
Okay. Because what you're doing is certainly very innovative as a young technician, and I'm sure that the CES grant is designed to support young people like you. Kamal, any other comments from you before we get to the next segment? Perhaps what encouragement would you want to give to young people? Of course, you are a past student of the Presentation College. I could not hold my tongue here, so I'm sure your former PBC teachers and principal, Mr. Jeremiah, would be very proud of you. But any final comments from you before we get to the next segment?
Yes, I'm sure my past school would be proud, and my past students, my past peers in school. But encouragement I would give to everyone my age, younger, and people older is pursue what you want to do, find something that you're happy in doing and do it. There's a lot of, from what I've seen in my travels, there's a lot of industries that we can get into as young Grenadians. A lot of things that Grenada don't have that we need. It may not just be in the yachting, but in everything. And I want to encourage young ones, like myself and younger, to do what you like, do what you love, find a passion, do research. Research is very important. We have the internet, we use it for good, and find something that you want to do and you love doing. That's my encouragement.
Absolutely, Kamal. Certified yacht technician, one of the very first Grenadian certified yacht technicians. That's a young man that Grenadians should be proud of and celebrate. You're still not hearing me, huh? All right, folks. That was Kamal Gray. We're still having some issues there because he can't seem to hear us clearly.
Sorry, I lost audio again.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll have to get to the next segment, Kamal. Folks, stand by. We will come back with the panel segment of the week. We have here Dr. David Hines and the Honorable Peter David, who is the Member of Parliament for the town of St. George. So please stand by, folks. We will be right back after this. The next segment of the Bubb Report comes to you compliments S.A. Johnson Funeral Home. They are a Caribbean family-owned funeral service. They offer a full range of funeral services at affordable prices in New York City. They can be reached on 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity. Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG-10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching. And welcome back, viewers. Just as a programming note, we did extend an invitation to the National Democratic Congress's representative, Minister of Foreign Affairs Joseph Andall, to be here. He indicated that this week was going to be very difficult for him to appear. But in the interest of balance, I just want the public to know that we did reach out to the other side. He did give us a promise that he will try to make the Bubb Report next week. So we are watching this space to see if Mr. Andall will materialize on his commitment to following through and appearing on the program next week. And at this point, I wish to welcome, we're supposed to have 3 guests here, but 2 of them are here. So sometimes they say less is more. So that's a good thing, right? Mr. David, is that a good thing, sir?
Well, sometimes it is. We'll know at the end of the day.
We will know. All right. So the Honorable Peter David, Grenada's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, former Minister of Agriculture. He's also the Member of Parliament, undefeated in the town of St. George. Mr. David, welcome to the report.
Thanks a million for inviting me, Kellen. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank
Absolutely. You. And we also have Dr. David Hines, political scientist, associate professor at the University of Arizona. Dr. Hines, welcome to the program again. This is your second appearance on the Bubb Report, so we're happy to have you, sir. Dr. Hines, can you hear me?
Yes. And thanks. Yes, I'm hearing you. Are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you. Go ahead.
Yes, no, I was just saying a small correction. I teach at Arizona State University, which is different from the University of Arizona, which is
Okay, thank you
in another location. Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that correction there, Professor. So, gentlemen, we really wanted to have a conversation on, again, we titled this segment, Diplomacy, Diplomatic Passports, Ethics, and so on, because we really wanted to look at this issue within the context of a foreign policy lens. And so I want to begin by opening with this question. Can we talk about the current foreign policy approaches in the Caribbean within the context of appointing ambassadors at large? And I want to begin with Mr. David first. Of course, you were a former Minister of Foreign Affairs. So can you talk to us about, it's not only Grenada that engages in this, the business of appointing ambassadors at large in parts of the world where Caribbean countries do not have representation. So can you talk about the reasoning and the need behind such an approach in the first place?
Sure, Kellen, but before we start, let me just commend your previous guest, Kamal. I think he's a wonderful story you had there, because, I used to be Minister of Tourism too, and one of the things that I observed as Tourism Minister is the importance of the yachting industry in Grenada. Being the most southern of the Caribbean countries, apart from Trinidad and Tobago, it is a huge industry. In fact, Trinidad, the repairs of yachts is a huge industry, because during the hurricane season, they come into us because we are so southern. We are safer from hurricanes. So I want to commend him and commend you for taking up the issue and to ask other young people to follow his footsteps in going in the direction of tourism maintenance of yachts and so on for the industry.
Absolutely, and his story, his story is such a beautiful.
I mean, the
story.
only problem I see in the interview is that he went to the PBC rather than GBSS. But like you, we have to live with that.
That's right?
We have to live with you guys. Anyway, yes, with respect to diplomatic passports, Karen, this thing about having non-nationals. First of all, diplomacy is expensive, very expensive. There's 190 countries in the world, over 190 that is in need. We need representation. Now, some people might ask, why do we need representation in Azerbaijan? Why do we need representation in Iran or Moscow? Non-traditional countries. Well, you are well aware that one of the issues we are confronting is to develop better relations with non-traditional, including African countries. I mean, we're talking about Kenya, we're talking about Ghana, we talk about Uganda, we talk about Libya, we talk about Morocco, we talk about South Africa. We talk about several countries throughout the African continent that we need a diplomatic representation in. And the cost to small island developing states is huge, millions upon millions of dollars. So, of course, you try to find persons in those countries who are capable, but it is not something that Grenada does. We have in Grenada several persons who represent European countries. We have my good friend Shadel. She's an honorary consul in Grenada for India. We have Lisa Taylor, honorary consul for Spain in Grenada. We have the Wilkinson, Margaret Wilkinson, honorary consul for Sweden in Grenada. And current Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell, he was the honorary consul for the Netherlands in Grenada. All non-paid jobs. They finance the offices, but they represent the countries in Grenada. Meaning, if the Grenada government wants something to do with India, we go through my good friend, Honorary Consul Shadel Compton. So it is not unusual for that to happen, because diplomacy being so expensive, the amount of countries in the world being so many, and the new initiatives that we are looking for causes us to seek out persons in those countries who have two criteria, in my view. One, that they are able to represent your interests. And secondly, they can afford to do it, meaning that they can set up the office, put up the plaque, and represent our country there. When we reach out to them, they respond. So the idea of having non-nationals represent countries throughout the world is not unique to Grenada, Dominica, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, any of these countries. It is something that becomes necessary because of the limitations of financing in order to conduct our diplomacy. And as you're well aware, if you look at our budget, our budgetary allocations are hugely dependent on inflows of money from outside of the country.
Mm-hmm. Let us bring in Dr. Hines here. You've heard Peter David's theory of the case. Small island developing states with limited resources have to be able to leverage other people to represent them around the world. Your theory of the case, Dr. Hines?
Yeah, I completely agree with Honorable Peter David. The argument is very compelling. We cannot divorce this diplomatic passport from the larger citizen initiative where we sell passports around the world. And I think that's where we get into murky waters. What is the objective? Is the objective of our governments in the Caribbean what Peter David said there? Or is it a means of exchanging this service for something else? And I think that's where the question is. On the surface, yes, it makes sense. We save a lot of money. We need to be in all corners of the world in this global environment. But the question is, what is your hidden objective? So you have the objective that we see, what the Honorable Peter David laid out there. But what is the subtext? What is the subtext? You see, the executive branch in our Caribbean has a lot of leeway. Do these people that you're appointing, do you go to the parliament for some kind of oversight to allow the parliament to confirm these people? No. And so here is the executive acting on its own. And so there's no accountability. And so the population doesn't know what is happening behind the scenes until one of these gets caught up in some kind of scandal. And then you say, my God, but didn't my government screen this person? Well, your government is not going to screen somebody who maybe give them a couple $1 million for the party in power, and you give them a diplomatic passport in exchange. And so there is the problematic there of what the whole scheme is used for. And that, for me, is the big issue.
Mm-hmm. And let me bring back Peter here. Mr. David, you've heard Dr. Hines's theory of the case here, that there are issues with respect to due diligence. There are issues with respect to the way that the ambassadors at large are appointed, that these diplomats are appointed. It's not so much that the actual intention is good, but the way that the intention is executed can be problematic. Your response to Dr. Hines's articulation?
I appreciate that what Dr. Hines is saying with respect to maybe some kinds of oversight in doing it. But I think that there's one thing he said I disagreed with. You can separate CBI from diplomatic passports, because St. Vincent does not have CBI, Sweden does not have CBI, Spain does not have CBI, but they appoint diplomats in far corners of the world who they do due diligence on. But so I think we need to separate, because I think that is what is happening in the public domain. In the public domain, there is this conflation of the two issues of CBI. CBI program is citizenship by investment. And that is a whole nother discussion, because, you know, the US has a CBI program. You hear about E2. Canada has a CBI program.
The United Kingdom does.
The United Kingdom does. But the thing is, when we small island developing states decide to pursue an independent path, with difficulties sometimes, we always hear the big states saying, we could do it, but you can't do it. And that is my problem. I recognize, Dr. Hines, and I agree with you. There can be more oversight. There can be more structure in place to ensure that the people are properly vetted. But at the same time, let's look at the reasons and the basis of the program. So, for example, CBI. CBI is a program aimed at attracting investment into the region. The reason why you have CBI programs in the United States, in Canada. I remember when Hong Kong was going back to China, I lived in Vancouver. And the tons of Chinese who were coming into Vancouver, and why did the Canadians allow them into Canada on easy conditions? Because they wanted to attract Chinese capital into Canada. But when Africa started to talk about Chinese capital, all hell break loose. China is trying to take over the world. We must be able to distinguish between what is in our interest and what is in the interest of these developed countries who try to restrict our development. Had we had flows of capital from the United States, from Canada, from Great Britain, had they continued, if they were to give us reparations in the amounts that is required, we will have no need for CBI. So Grenada, Antigua, Dominica, Malta has a CBI program. Turkey has a CBI program. The CBI program, and I agree with you, Dr. Hines, we always could do better vetting. So some of these persons I saw in the 60 Minutes report, but the 60 Minutes report wouldn't tell us about the good people who have done good things, because what they are trying to do is stifle our development. So I agree, but we as developing countries, particularly small island developing countries, have to find ways. And I agree, Dr. Hines, sometimes there is an abuse of the process. Sometimes, as in the case Kellon spoke about, as in the 60 Minutes, there are people who slip through the net. Sometimes there's an abuse of the process by certain people. But at the end of the day, the purpose of the CBI program, so Kellon, all of the big hotel projects we have in Grenada in the last 5 years has come as a result of CBI. We're talking about Silver Sands. We're talking about Range. We're talking about several projects. They have come through CBI. So yes, let us put good due diligence processes in place. Let us ensure that the people we get. So for example, when the Netherlands decided to appoint Deacon Mitchell, former attorney and current prime minister, as honorary consul in Grenada, they did their due diligence. When they decided to appoint Lisa Taylor, they did their due diligence, and Chanel Compton, they did their due diligence. All of them are attorneys. All of them are very good repute. We can do the same thing, and we can do the same thing that these large countries are doing, despite the fact that they are trying to stifle us. So I think we have to put it in the context of countries who trying to forestall our development. But I agree with Dr. Hines. We need to maybe upgrade our due diligence and upgrade the processes through which we appoint people.
So let us talk about your former administration's role in due diligence. I do remember an interview that I conducted with your successor in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Oliver Joseph, about one Justin Soon, who was appointed as Grenada's ambassador to the World Trade Organization. And I do remember vividly, and I confronted Mr. Joseph about this, the idea that here you have Mr. Justin Soon, who isn't into cryptocurrency, but meeting with the Russia's ambassador to the WTO, talking about cryptocurrency while representing Grenada. So there were clearly some issues of conflicts of interest there that I mentioned to him. You're nodding, you're shaking your head. But let me finish.
I'm not shaking my head. I'm saying, Kellon, that governing is not easy. Sometimes you have these challenges. Sometimes you have to pull in diplomats. You ever heard about we call them to capital to have discussions? These things will occur, and we have to pull them back to capital and say, listen, Mr. Sun, that is not how we conduct our diplomacy. That is not a reason to stop appointing people. It is a reason for ensuring that you have systems in place to ensure that people abide by your government's, your state's diplomatic initiative. So I agree with you. And when I shake my head, I'm simply saying, yes, it's another occurrence. another occurrence of a problem. But the United States has had to recall ambassadors too. I don't hear anybody telling them. Mr. Kennedy's, President Kennedy's father was a major donor to the.
That's Joe Kennedy. Yes, yeah.
That is why he ended up in Britain. So we have these challenges, and we must confront these challenges as an independent state seeking our development.
Dr. Hines, you, however, and we're going to segue to the second part of this conversation, and that has to do with the, I guess, the process-oriented nature. Dr. Hines, you mentioned it in your opening there, and that has to do with, okay, you get a diplomatic passport, but then there is a quid pro quo, right? People donate monies to political parties. I want you to expand on your idea of that type of political clientelism, as I call it. Do you think that is problematic?
Yes, I think it's problematic, and I appreciate Mr. David pointing to the universality of these programs, but there is a particularity in the Caribbean that as small island state, we are engaging in a global model for which we may not be properly equipped. So, for example, we do not have the resources in the first place, so that's why we are exploring these projects. And so when we get in, we don't have the resources to vet people. We don't have the resources to do the kind of global due diligence to make sure that we are recruiting people of good standing and so forth. And so the project becomes problematic for us in that we are more likely to recruit crooks than the developed countries, because the developed countries have the security capacity and intelligence capacity to vet people. We don't have that. So that's the first problem there. And there's the problem of our party politics. Our party politics is the kind of politics that is so visceral that the party, the political party, that animal, the political party, has become kind of monster in our Caribbean. And the political party would do more than normal things in order to get resources. We talk about corruption in government, but often that corruption starts in the party that forms the government. And so I'm saying that our openness, if you will, to corruption, and our society has not always been militant enough against corruption, makes it easy for parties and the governments they form to turn the blind eye to people who may be shady. So that's a second problematic. And then the third problematic for me is the whole question of culture. We are post-plantation societies. We are societies that are beaten up upon by big countries, imperialist countries. And so the idea of selling our diplomatic passport or giving our diplomatic passports to people in these big countries is something that I don't think that the ordinary Caribbean person could wrap their minds around. And that is why I said at the beginning that one maybe ought not to link the citizen investment program with its diplomatic passport program. But it's hard in the popular consciousness not to link it, right? And so there is the cultural problem. That's the third problematic. And of course, the fourth problematic is that even if you're doing these things, what about accountability at home? What about the parliament? Is this?
But some might say, but Dr. Hines, some might say that accountability comes at the ballot box. You have the chance to, remove those people from office who you believe are not performing.
I would say that's minimalist accountability. That Maurice Bishop used to say, accountability every 5 years. We're talking here about accountability in the process of governance. All right? And so for me, those 4 problematics are very important as we look at this project. I am not against diplomatic passports in principle, but I think it ought to be managed properly, and it ought to be less expansive than it is. So that for example, Africa, I would not mind diplomatic passports in a place like Africa. We have had good relations with Africa, foreign relations for 40, 50 years. And it may be better to vet people in Africa than you would in Azerbaijan or one of these places that we don't have any kind of cultural relations with.
Let us get to Mr. David's perspective here. Well, Dr. Hines, yes, go ahead, Mr. David. But Dr. Hines is saying here that the manner in which we proceed with the sale of diplomatic passports opens the door to corruption. We have seen in recent times.
Just use the language sale of diplomatic passports. Dr. Hines, I think we contribute into that consciousness I speak of in the language we use. Language is a powerful tool. You know that, the pedagogy and so on. We don't sell diplomatic passports. How come we don't say Sweden is selling a diplomatic passport, or that our lawyers say bought a diplomatic passport? I mean, it is. These people are not diplomats in the strictest sense of the word. But in any event, I think myself and Dr. Hines are getting a little closer to agreement, because at the end of what he says, yes, maybe we can do it in this way, that way, the other. And that conversation is one we must have. So, for example, the conversation of due diligence. I agree with you. We do not have the capacity. So that is why I remember after we had some problems. In fact, Grenada is known as a country with the tightest due diligence. Why? In the early stages of our CBI program, the Prime Minister Mitchell at the time had suffered some serious setbacks with some of the people who were appointed going to jail and all of that. So we have partnered, and we partnered with the US, for example. In fact, in recent times with the issue with E2, with the issue with Russia, I know this present government and the previous government said to the intelligence agencies, we'll give you a look at what we're doing. If you believe that there's anybody there with a problem, let us know. So I agree with you. We have limited resources to do due diligence, and that is a practical matter, not a conceptual or philosophical issue. That is a practical matter. I disagree with you, though. Then if you link that to appointing crooks, I agree. But we are not naturally disposed to appointing crooks. That will fall into the view of us by those other countries. That somehow all of us in the third world, all of us in Africa, we are just crooks. We are just there trying to con each other. No, we are trying to develop our countries. I believe that on all sides of the political spectrum, we have good people who are trying to find ways in which we can develop our countries. This government currently is supporting the CBI program as much as or even more than the previous government, because the budget is much more dependent on CBI in the upcoming year than it was in previous years. So I agree with you that we can find ways to sort out CBI and sort out diplomatic passports, the way we issue diplomatic passports, not sell them. With respect to Parliament, I agree. It is something we can consider. Currently, no diplomats are appointed through the Parliament. Not the regular diplomats, not the diplomats who are non-Grenadian, no diplomats. So maybe what you're saying, we should have a system like the US, where they are submitted to the Parliament, in the case of the US, the Senate and the Congress, in order to be vetted and agreed upon. I refer to another comment you made, though, about the tribal nature of our politics. It is so tribal. The more, I always say about the British, Dr. Hines, that the British run a trick on us. They gave us a very divisive political system, and then in order to change anything, we have to come together. So we have a divisive system and we're unable to come together, so we're unable to change any damn thing. So I agree with your principle, but with respect to our culture, yes, but culture is developed over time, and we have those of us who find ourselves in government with the challenge of government. Government is challenging. We must educate or at least have discussions with our people, and that is why I agree with you. Maybe Parliament is an adequate place to submit these issues for discussion and what I call bipartisan support, so that one party doesn't cuss the other party and call them crooks when they're in opposition, and when they get in government, they call in the others crooks, and we end up, Dr. Hines, with society. You know that in Guyana more than I could ever know in the tribal nature of our discourse. And I know the WPA tried its best to bring the different forces together, but it was difficult. So I agree with your principle, but I do believe, Dr. Bubb, that the basis on which we appoint diplomats, it's well-intentioned. There are some problems that arise because of, as Dr. Hines said, due diligence challenges. And of course, some people may abuse the system here and there. But I think the principle on the issuance of diplomatic passports is good. But I think on the CBI, I was a skeptic of the CBI. But when I got in and realized what CBI is about, and we can have a whole program on CBI, Kelowna, maybe at another time. I believe that as a developing small island, developing state, what we find is I remember one sitting in an OECS meeting, and one of the prime ministers or foreign ministers looking around the table and say, you know what, it's 7 of us poor nations sitting here trying to figure out how to make it, We were unable to help each other, so we had to look beyond. And that is why it is a small island state. You don't need CBI in Guyana because you just hit a payload in Guyana. Trinidad doesn't need CBI. Jamaica doesn't need CBI. We are the ones in the middle of the world winners, as it were. We have CBI. We try our best to make sure the citizens we get are well vetted. I don't believe we are doing enough, and we can do more. But the purpose of CBI is to find developmental finance where our old colonial masters have cut back on development assistance, and our passport, issuance of diplomatic passports to non-nationals, is based on our desire to have representation throughout the world to assist in the same developmental assistance program that we get. So Kellan, there's a lot that we can talk about to improve it. But I think at its basis, it's good intentions, but sometimes the road ahead is paved with good intentions, so we have to figure that out. But I think, Dr. Hines, you are right in saying what we need to do to get, and the fact that you said in Africa, I mean, we have African honorary councils. We have an African honorary council in Nigeria, and we can do that in Kenya and South Africa. But I disagree with you. Azerbaijan, although it's culturally different, they may be able to give us a lot of resources too. We just have to make sure we check them out properly.
Dr. Hines, anything else you wish to add before we get to the other element of this, which has to do with the clientelism that has been a major topic of debate in Grenada? Cabinet conclusion, who donated what monies to party offices and so on, and denials that they received the money. We don't even know the name of the diplomat. I don't know the gentleman's name. All we know that he's of Polish origin. But Dr. Hines, anything else you wish to add there before we get to the other part of this conversation?
No, except to say that when we discuss these matters, and always say that foreign relations is an extension of domestic politics. And I think that's where you're going next.
Yes.
That foreign policy cannot be carried out and cannot be conceptualized outside of domestic policy. And that is why I'm stressing the particularity of the Caribbean is what should shape and inform these projects that we are engaging in.
So let me bring back Mr. David here. Now, Mr. David, obviously there are no laws and rules governing campaign finance in the Caribbean. Dr. Hines teed this up earlier by making the point that the appointment or the issuance of diplomatic passports, I'm going to be more diplomatic with the way that I with the way that I frame it, right? The issuance of diplomatic passports as opposed to the sale of diplomatic passports, Mr. David. Okay, fair enough. But Dr. Hines is making the point here. And as we have seen, the current administration in St. George's have articulated the view that in the process of the issuance of diplomatic passports, you have situations where some of these diplomats, these ambassadors at large, turn around and donate large sums of monies to the campaign of different political parties, different political organizations in Grenada and in other Caribbean islands. Do you believe that, I suppose, the system of patronage that we see ought to be, I guess, reformed or tightened up? Dr. Hines, I would begin with you on that question. So a diplomat is appointed, they then donate X amount of money to different political parties. I want to get your thoughts on that idea. Do you think that is problematic, or do you think that that's just par for the course?
No, it's problematic because those people are influencing elections. We know now that elections are not, the results of elections are not determined just by your base. It's also determined by how you're able to reach segments of the population that are not necessarily your base. And to do that, it costs a lot of money. Our elections in the Caribbean, given the size of our population, the amount of money that we spend in election are enormous per capita. So if you have somebody who's donating big money to the political parties, they're influencing the outcome of the election. And so therefore, I would argue that if I am doing this diplomatic passporting, I would write into legislation prohibiting them from giving monetary donations to political parties and other organizations. So that's an example of where I will go. I am not kicking the project out of the field. I'm saying that given how the project can aid and abet corruption and clientelism, we should have legislation and very clearly the parameters under which we are engaging in this project. And one of it would be the prohibiting of these people from making donations to political parties and other organizations.
So the prohibition of donation, Mr. David, that is Mr. Hines' theory of the case here, that your political party, it is alleged that your political party, the NNP, received funds from this unnamed Polish diplomat who wants his money back. Let's get your thought process on that idea that perhaps diplomats ought not to be donating funds to political parties to influence the outcome of elections.
Well, I think it's a wider discussion. I mean, the discussion on diplomats, I mean, where do you stop it? Where do you start it? What campaign financing? We need to have a discussion about campaign financing, because campaign financing, historically, it's the government in opposition always calling for campaign financing. And when you get in power, you decide, no restrictions because I'm in power. So you really want to restrict the man who is in opposition getting money to beat you at the polls. So that is why we never get campaign financing done. That is, again, the point Dr. Hines made earlier about the tribal nature of our discourse, which is something I have lamented. I have always said, I've been a member of both parties. I've been in parliament twice for each party. I won twice for NMP, twice for NDC. So I understand the financing and the mechanisms in all of the parties. We have no restrictions on campaign financing. And some of the complaints I hear from the opposition is they do it when you're in government. All of the parties raise money, not because it's illegal, I'm saying this, but because there is no restriction. Now, on the question of whether or not ambassadors should do it or not do it, we can have that discussion. But we need to go wider than that, because that is a very small part of the campaign financing issue. And the the US has extreme difficulty doing that. A lot of these ambassadors they send to the region. I have known ambassadors in Barbados who got the job because mommy or daddy was a big campaign financer to the Democratic or Republican Party. They have told me that. So this campaign financing issue is not a local issue. And I think sometimes we tend to beat up on ourselves. Like if we in the Caribbean are doing things that are so outrageous. No, it is a campaign financing issues are issues that confront large and small countries. So yes, I agree, Dr. Hines. Maybe restrict diplomats, but maybe restrict other people. Maybe restrict how much you can get. Maybe restrict, there's a whole lot of discussion. But the first thing we have to start, in a referendum, Keller, do you remember that? We had a referendum where we wanted to change some things. And one parliamentarian stood up and said, yes, we should change it, but not when you're in power. The question is, do we change our tribal instincts to have a good discussion on both sides of the aisle where we can decide first of all, determine how it is negatively affecting us? A study maybe needs to be done on that, and then to decide how to change it. Because you are not going to change it by crying, because when one person says, okay, I'm not taking money from that one, believe you me, if there are no regulations, the other side will take it from that same person and proceed with their campaign. So yes, I agree with the principle that we must discuss how campaign financing affects the outcome of elections, and then we proceed to determine what do we do by way of restrictions.
Okay, and now, Mr. David, we are joined now, viewers and listeners, by another leftist we brought in. This is the convention of leftists today.
I'm sure I haven't heard from my friend for a while, so I'm not sure where he is. So let him declare that rather than you do that.
Well, Mr. Thomas, what say you, sir? Are you still a leftist?
Well, I have a permanent gaze.
A permanent gaze, you say? Okay. Welcome, Mr. Thomas.
And my gaze is determined to the left. I don't see what can deter me from that.
Okay. All right.
Lots have changed, but and people celebrate the change. But I say if it's going to be changed for the worst, I'll stay as permanent as constant as the Northern Star.
That's right. Okay. Welcome, Brother Thomas. And we're having a conversation here, Mr. Thomas. You have been briefed on what we're talking about. Yes. And that has to do with the role of the appointment of ambassador-at-large diplomats and the function that they play not only in representing our islands in different parts of the world, but the problematic nature that comes with the sort of the murkiness that comes with those appointments, the way that, for example, they can influence the outcome of election, the issues with respect to corruption and the engendering and encouragement of corruption. So I just want to get your thoughts. Do you think that the appointment of these diplomats is, in the way that it's set up, non-nationals as diplomats, is problematic, and can it actually encourage corruption in our islands?
I think off the bat it is problematic, and unfortunately for many of our small island states, we don't have a permanent diplomatic corps. If you take, for example, a country like Cuba, they have a well-trained diplomatic corps that can do all of their postings all over the world. In countries like St. Vincent and in Grenada and some of the other islands in the Caribbean, and even some other countries in the South, they don't have a permanent diplomatic corps. And for whatever reason, some of these people come calling either to claim that they can offer assistance to, or our countries go out seeking these people. And invariably, I think what happens is that some of them may serve some useful purpose, some good purposes, but all of the issues which you have flagged, the whole issue of that money in election campaign, the issue of corruption, the issue of other people who are not truly for the cause of national development, having such important diplomatic posts and can influence in a negative way, not only the reputation of your country, but in ways which can be much more nefarious. We have a whole string of them, people who would have come in either as investors. They may not have gone to become diplomats, but they get citizenship, they get the passport, and then under the name of St. Vincent, they go out and do a lot of things. We have Weiss, we have the guy who had the Buckham Resort, Ames, who was recently convicted in the UK for running a Ponzi scheme and so on and so forth. So those are the difficulties that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let me bring back the rest of the panel here. The problem, though, is that we do not have campaign finance laws in the Caribbean. So in the context of the recent debate in Grenada around the donation that this Polish diplomat, unnamed Polish diplomat, I really wish the government would tell me what the name of this diplomat is. We have been trying to reach this alleged diplomat. Apparently he didn't get his diplomatic status because your party lost Mr. David, so he's not a diplomatic passport holder. But the point is, there are no, in the absence of campaign finance laws in the Caribbean, who is to stop anyone from donating monies to political campaigns? Dr. Hines, let's get your perspective on this.
Well, that is the problem. That is the problem. To stop. Yeah, that is the problem. There is nothing to save in donations. And so therefore, once you have that development, it puts the entire project at risk. So one may say, yes, I am for, giving diplomatic passports to places where we don't have the capacity to represent ourselves. Mm-hmm. But then you now come to the question, what is the cost of that? Mm-hmm. And if the cost of that is giving one party, meaning the ruling party, an edge over the opposition party, then you begin to question the project itself. And I think that's where we are. I think when you have projects like the Citizen Investment Initiative, like this diplomatic passport initiative, that should be an issue that you must get consensus in the parliament, consensus in the public. It's so important, and it's problematic. And I think that if there's going to be a fallout, there is consensus, and the country as a whole has to take responsibility for the fallout. Success, the country as a whole takes a success. But if you do it during power, and
I think we're having some difficulties with Dr. Hines' internet here. But let's get your view on this, Peter. Why was your administration not able to put in place campaign finance or ethics laws with respect to donations to political campaigns, and of course declaring who you received monies from in the campaign? Do you think that was something that your administration missed in the past, and missed opportunity there?
The wider question is, why has no country in the Caribbean done it? I mean, to single out, why has my administration, the previous NDC administration I was a member of, the previous GOLP administration, GNP administration, why is St. Vincent not have it? So the question, as I said earlier, because, and I think Dr. Hines hit the note, the question of consensus. And that brings me to my everlasting comment about the tribal nature of our discourse, that we need to sit down in a dispassionate way, in a non-tribal way, and have discussion about these issues. I said in the last parliament, Kellen, and you would have heard me, that we need to have bipartisan committees in the parliament. Call it bipartisan, call it what you wish, but we need to sit down to bring everybody up to speed as to what CBI is about, what passport issuance to non-residents, non-citizens are about. Yes, we need to have that discussion, because the previous NDC administration had it. They didn't do anything about it. They issued diplomatic passports to non-Grenadians also. I was there. I know the previous NMB administration did it. It's done in St. Vincent, Dominica, St. Lucia. So let's have a collective discussion. Everything we have breaks down as to which side you're on. So when you're in government, you don't want campaign financing laws. When you're in opposition, you want it, because when you're in government, you have an advantage. What Dr. Hines said. So yes, I agree. I agree. We need to sit down. And in the last parliament, I said to the parliament very clearly, we need to set up a committee of the parliament of both sides that deals with foreign policy. If you look at the record from a month ago, you would see my call for that. And I believe that's the only salvation for our countries, because the British have given us a divided mechanism and tell us the way to change it is to come together. St. Vincent's a classic example of that. Everybody agreed with the content, but nobody wants to change it. So we need to come together. We need to change constitution, bad partisanship. I don't know. I am not at the point of pessimism. Like Jomo, I have a constant gaze, and my gaze is towards that development. And I pray God that we'll see more of it. We have come a long way. I don't think we've gone back on some, but we've come a long way. But coming together to make these changes is the only way these changes will be made.
Jomo?
Yes, sir.
Your thoughts on that?
I am not so sure that, I mean, the whole issue of campaign financing, as Peter correctly said, is that the party in opposition wants it. And like I say here in St. Vincent, opposition parties like Calypso. So when they're in opposition, the Calypsonians beating the government, they like it. And the moment they get into power, the jamming Calypsonians hard. It's the same thing. So,
but they do the same thing with journalists too. Some of them are quick. Exactly. They're very enthusiastic to appear on the Bubb Report in opposition and government. Exactly. And some of your people did it too, Peter. It's not only the NDC that's doing it. Some of your people did it too. So.
But I have come to the conclusion that Caribbean politicians are master rhetoricians. They're masters. I mean, we have had some of the best speakers, from Manly and Fida in the north to Bonham and Walter Rodney and Ralph Gonzalez and Eric Gary in the south. So we have, and not to mention Maurice Bishop. So we have great speakers, but we have a few of them who are committed in their heart, in their soul, in their belly, in their gut to do the right thing. In fact, that generation, that post-adult suffrage representation generation has been a monumental failure, has been a disappointment of proportions that would haunt us for a long time. People don't like to hear me say this when I say it because they think that I'm over the top, but they are deceitful in the way in which they have taken our people for a ride. But if we look, we talk about campaign financing, but do they have campaign financing, for example, in the United States? Following Citizens United versus FCC, that has completely ripped that open, because now the moment private corporations got the standing as human beings, they can make contributions, huge contributions, or they can set up all kind of foundations and all kind of bots and whatever that unfairly, in my estimation, influence elections. But we have to have a generation that is committed to do the right thing. If politicians in the Caribbean, for example, say, look, we are never going to be developed like London or Paris or France or Nairobi, but we could commit to be the best democracy, small island democracy there is, looking for best practices, looking for issues that will help us with poverty alleviation and unemployment and so on. We are going to be much better off. But a lot of times they don't care about that. They tell us one thing, they get in. And the moment they get in, I think, in fact, some of them go in with all good intention. And after the first term or the second term, and they realize that the problems are intractable, then they start, it becomes, as the elders say, every turkey fight for your own crop. So all of them trying to see how much they can pull, how much private cooperation they could form to siphon off this here or that there. And that's the difficulty that we have. We need a new generation, a younger generation of cadre, of people who are seriously committed to the advancement of our Caribbean civilization, and would put, not that we have to neglect in the way the revolutionary generation of the 60s and the 70s neglected themselves and threw it all for the process. But we can have a happy mix where you want to ensure that your family don't starve or you don't neglect your family. But certainly you want to look at a broader family. And I'm always taken by this point. I remember when Fidel Castro's sister Juanita had left, defected to the Spain, and then she eventually showed up in Miami. And Barbara Walters asked Fidel, well, what is this thing about your sister leaving? And Fidel said, my sister? I have millions of sisters across the world. So if we see family as the entire country, rather than the child or the son or the daughter that you have, then I think we'll be in a better position to look after the interests of our nation, the interests of our country, rather than to try to feather our own nest. Until we do that, all of them would talk around issues of financing because they know that they could always call up some private person to buy us 10,000 t-shirts, give us some change here to do a campaign, and so on and so forth. Unless that kind of personal commitment, party leadership commitment comes in, I think the problem is going to remain.
Okay. And we have a viewer comment here. I believe that there's a typo, but the viewer is saying, I'm a listener of your Monday night program, Jomo. And
Yes.
Can you explain to the audience why St. Vincent and the Grenadines does not have a CBI program, although the current opposition NDP is in favor of such a program?
Well, the government says that citizenship is the highest, citizenship is the highest status in the land, and they don't want to sell it. But it's nonsense, it's foolish talk, because Ames came in and they gave him citizenship. But what was he? He was just simply a con man. Weiss came in and they gave him citizenship. What was he? He was simply a con man. Ames ended up in prison in England. Weiss ended up in prison in Los Angeles. And we can go back to the nanos in the 70s and early 80s. I think that one of the nanos ended up in prison in France. So I think we have to look at the issue closely, because I am of the view that St. Vincent could easily take care of another 50,000 people. Easily. But we don't want 50,000 of the down-pressed. We want a middle class or a thriving class of people who can contribute rather than to come back and be rather parasitic on the nation. So that's the only thing about why we don't have it. I think we don't have it because the government wants to play politics with it. I remember in the campaign, Prime Minister's son, Camilo Gonzalez, saying, oh, do you want to sell so many passports that Chinese would become the determining factor in the elections? Where have Chinese been determining factor in any of the countries where they have citizenship by investment? So it's cheap politics. It's politics that are intended, like it's politics of what I call red meat politics. You throw it out there hoping that your dogs would bark or your dogs would bite, but nothing substantive. And I think it's something that we need to look into. I remember after the last elections, Peter Wickham, who is a major strategist and pollster for the Unity Labour Party, came out and said that he sees no reason why all of the countries across the region should not accept the citizen by investment program, because some countries have made an inordinate amount of money about it where we are so depressed economically. I can't say that I am opposed to it in principle, for the simple reason that I don't subscribe to this notion that Peter is Grenadian and Brother Hines is Guyanese. All of us, as we were told, came on the same ship. And all of us are part of this universe. So why is this notion that we are separated and saying, oh, this person is Guyanese and this person is Vincentian? As John Henry Clark said, is a damn fool who would accept an island over a continent anyway. You saw some of the talk here recently that Africans are coming into St. Vincent, or I saw something about Africans are coming into Antigua. What is that about? Except for the case, and Brother Hines will know well, where these things were used back in the 70s, to attend to rig elections and so on in Guyana. The allegation, fairly strong allegations were made then. But let our people be. You can't talk about CARICOM and talk about trying to bring people together, and then the moment somebody from Antigua comes to St. Vincent, you have a problem with it. because we're going to have the reverse now. In the last 20 years, everybody was wanting to beat down on Guyanese. But now Guyana is flooding with new wealth. So you can be sure that in another 10 years, everybody heading south. They want to go.
Everybody will be heading to Guyana. This is so true. This is so true. Gentlemen, is there anything else you wish to add here to that question?
I just want to endorse Jomo's comments on and he raises the issue of population. I think that's an issue for our countries that we need to address, because the issue of size of our population is one that is retarding our development. But I just raise it to stick up in to tell Jomo that is something I absolutely agree with. And it's really refreshing to hear his views on CBI, because I was a skeptic early, and then I came to the position and so as Jomo that it's not a matter that we should just discard, but population as an economic issue should be addressed in these small island developing states so that we can better economic conditions.
All right, let's get to some quick viewer comments here, and then we would take a break. We'd wrap up the program today. Shireen James is saying, why the development of the country always seems to be hotels when all other infrastructure is lacking? Why can they not develop a hospital, roads, etc.? Is it because there is no economic returns in doing those developments? A very interesting point here, that people view the CBI program as being linked to hotels and resorts and villas and things like that. So this viewer is saying,
on that?
Yes, please go ahead, Mr. David.
I think her answer is in the question.
Yes.
But I do agree with the issue. I said time and time again to the previous administration, of which I was a member, and I said it when I was even in the NDC, that we need to take some of the CBI resources and plow it into agriculture so that agriculture can be married in the way it should be with tourism. I agree with her on that. But to say that the main economic driver right now is tourism, because we have a comparative advantage in tourism. But I agree with her that healthcare.
Do we really have a comparative advantage?
I believe so, but that's a whole other discussion, as opposed to other issues like other areas. There are other areas I'm talking about, as opposed to, I'm not saying we have an absolute comparative advantage. I'm saying as compared to other pillars of our economy, that is the one that maybe in this period gives us some advantage. But I simply say that I agree with her position that CBI money should be used for things other than tourism, because right now people are seeing CBI as just the sale of passports to benefit a few people in the south of the island. I think my brother Hines said earlier that we need to have a more expansive discussion about CBI, about diplomatic passports, so that the nation, and Brother Hines said it very eloquently, could be brought with us on the journey, and we may come up to different answers. But I think one of the problems we have is that the people are not sufficiently involved in these discussions. But maybe, as Jomo said, it is because they want to keep things in a particular corner. But that was my response to her.
Okay. Cassandra Mitchell is saying, the more I learn about this Polish investor. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Hines. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
No, I was just about to say, implicit in the comment by the viewer there is this whole question of development and transformation. We have gotten into this talk about development in the Caribbean, and develop means everything to everybody. But we're not talking about transformation, and implicit there is the question of social and political transformation of our region. And I say region deliberately, all right, because I don't do it as individual islands. This question of transformation, and I do almost comment about the post-independence generation. If I'm unkind to them, the one thing or the thing that I'm most unkind to them about is that they didn't engage in transformation when there was space in those early decades to engage in transformation. Hence the clash between them and the radicals, and that may have put us back 3, 4, 5, 6 decades. So we have to get back to this question. If we're engaging in these projects that are risky, at least let us use the returns from them to transform the society. You don't
Absolutely.
transform a society with hotels. Right?
Absolutely.
As Lloyd Bess told us so eloquently, then I put on my tombstone that I hated tourism, right? Because he recognized that it is not going to transform the society. Or Tim Hector, who said that tourism really has helped us in the Caribbean to develop a generation or generations of people who are people and not for themselves, cleaning people's mess, doing this, serving people, but not serving themselves. And at the end of the day, they're alienated, as the old Marxists would say, alienated from the results of their own labor. And puts us where we are now. Because if we are not transforming the society, and we are not widening the economic base, we are not making best use of what we have. And so we have to go and in these schemes, selling passports and so on. At the end of the day, while I am not objecting to selling passports or to appointing people, one day I would like to see it end.
All right.
Because if I
go ahead, Jomo.
If I could just weigh in quickly on the point which I think it was a young lady made having to do with
Shireen.
hotels.
Yeah.
We have had an explosion of hotels across the region. But if we check the unemployment numbers, if we check the poverty numbers, they're stubborn things. They don't move. So in St. Vincent, after all of these hotels over the last 20 years, poverty is still at 37%. The World Bank did a report in 2020 which says that youth unemployment is 46%. So, and I remember there was a report from the University of the West Indies some years ago from Mona campus where they studied the hotel and the hotel trade in Jamaica. And it was said that close to 90 cents of every dollar, every tourism dollar, either never got to Jamaica or was sent out of Jamaica. So, and if one thing should tell us that we can't put our pot on the fire on the issue of the hotel trade is COVID. Because when COVID hit, all of that fell down. It completely fell out. So those are just my brief thoughts on the whole issue. And I think the sister is making a point that it is central for us to do the kind of infrastructural development. And I know it's not easy because you need the money to do it. But we just borrowed $500 million here in St. Vincent to build a quote-unquote a modern port. But we have nothing to export. And in the next 20 years, we will have nothing to export, but we are spending $500 million on building a modern port. And when I think about it, I can just think about John Pilger's Confession of the Economic Hitman, where in that text, and in fact, his new fourth edition is coming out next month, he talks about the ways in which our governments in the developed world are being sucked into this debt trap, where they're borrowing monies that would cushion what Walter Rodney used to call the bureaucratic bourgeoisie. You know, the politicians and the technocrats and so on, they benefit from it, but it hardly moves the needle in terms of economic development in these societies. Because after 60 years post-independence, going back all the way to Jamaica, the development that we have had is development on the margins. It has not gotten yet onto the page. It's still on the margin. And I think those are things that we have to think about when we are talking about development.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, stay with us. We will take a quick break. And Mr. David, I have some quick fire questions for you about your political party and what's happening there, and a reaction to you. Of course, you were former Minister of Agriculture. We see some marketing board consultations happening. I don't know if you were consulted, but we will talk about that.
Jomo is a journalist too. Please don't have him question me.
Well,
all right, no problem.
We will take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back. Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching. And welcome back, folks. So we are about to wrap up this conversation here on diplomats, diplomatic passports, and integrity in public life. We were joined by the former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Agriculture and MP for the town of St. George in Grenada, the Honorable Peter David, Dr. David Hines, who is an associate professor. I do not want to get the name of your university incorrect, but you are of Ghanaian origin. Arizona State University. Arizona State University. Thank you for that. And you've written extensively on politics and political life in the Caribbean. So we thank you for joining us. And our returning guest, Mr. Jomo Curtin. But before we get to some closing comments, Mr. David, talk to us. Last year, the New National Party didn't have a convention. That was historic. I mean, this is the first time in many years that the party did not have a convention. Can you talk about where the party is with respect to its machinery, its political machinery? How are things in the party at this point?
Well, it's not last year that we didn't have a convention. We actually had a convention last February. We didn't have one in 2021. So last year's convention was in lieu of the one, it was in replacement for the one in 2021. And according to the General Secretary, who is the man in charge of reorganizing, there is to be a convention, I think he said publicly, in the second quarter, which is anywhere up until June, sometime between now and June. So, so I know organizational work is taking place. I know he's working hard to get that done. So we look forward to a convention sometime April, May, June.
Okay. April, May, June of this.
Yeah, well, that is what he said, but it's mandated that there should be a convention every year in the New National Party.
Okay. Let us talk about the future of the leadership of the party. What is Dr. Mitchell saying about his role as future leader of the party? Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party when the convention comes around?
As the lawyer said, Dr. Mitchell was lucidly clear both in the campaign and after the election that it's his last election run. In fact, that was his mantra in the last election. That was his last run. I think at the swearing ceremony for the leader of the opposition, he did say that he's not going to be participating or putting himself up for leadership in the next convention, which is, he said that earlier this year. So we anticipate taking him at his word that he's not going to be putting himself up for leadership, and there would be other persons putting themselves up for leadership, and the party constitution allows a member of the party in good standing to put themselves up for leadership.
Would that other person include yourself, Mr. David?
Well, I am giving active consideration to it. Of course, I have paid my dues. I go back a long way. My good friend Jomo knows most of my history there. I go back 50 years in politics. So I'm giving active consideration to it. Like I told Dr. Mitchell some time ago, once it is confirmed, once the party confirms the convention, once the party determines when the convention is going to be, then I'm going to make a public statement on it. But to be fair, I can't say other than I'm giving very much active consideration to the issue of leadership of the party. But that depends on a whole heap of variables, and you know how politics can be unpredictable. But Dr. Mitchell said he's leaving, and certainly I'm considering it.
Okay, the sisterhood between Delma Thomas and Gloria Thomas, is that sisterhood the result of some issues that the MP for St. Andrew Northwest is having with a party? That's Delma Thomas. Are there any fissures? Are there any divisions there? Bad blood between Sister Thomas and the party, Mr. David?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind. No. I think Sister Delma is trying to do what, Kellogg, it is one thing I'll be remembered for if I die tomorrow, is my constant mantra that our politics is too divided. that there's a lot more we can achieve if we can not only work together, but find systemic changes that can be made to allow us to work together. Delma is the MP for St. Andrew Northeast. I know it is unusual in our politics to hear people from two parties working together, but I have said it for my entire political career that this tribalism that permeates our politics is something we need to change. And many people might not like what Delma is doing. In fact, when I went into government with the NDC, I was chastised for being too kind to members of the NNP. So I've experienced it in the NNP, in the NDC, and I'm sure Delma would experience some kind of misunderstanding on her actions. But as she said, and again, I take her at her word, she's trying to do what is best for her constituents and her party by working with persons on the other side. As I said in the last parliament, Kellogg, there will be an elections in 5 years. In the meantime, we have a government. We have to work with that government and try to make sure we develop our people. That is a critical task facing us at the moment. When the election comes, the people will look to us, to 15 of us, see which ones of us have done well and which ones of us have not done. And we accept the results of that. That is the word we use. That is the word we use to describe that is democracy. Delma is working with the other persons in our constituency who are in the government. I have no difficulty with it. I know there may be people who may misunderstand it and see it as not being sufficiently tribal. I welcome any non-tribal move on the part of anybody. Of course, she may do it differently to how I will do it, or another person may do it. So no, I don't think there's any fissures in the party. I think, of course, there may be people who call in Delma and say, Delma, how are you doing that? What are you doing? And I'm sure she has explained it to several persons, and I wish her well. At the end of the day, you know who I wish better? The constituents that you represent, and that to me is what I look to. And certainly, the more non-tribal action we have, is the better for our people.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Marketing Board, we're seeing some consultations around the future of the Marketing and National Importing Board. Obviously, you were former immediate past Minister of Agriculture before this new administration. What are your thoughts on the consultations that are happening, and just the future of the board? Should the MNIB be shuttered for good? Do you believe restructuring is in order? What does that restructuring look like? Your thoughts, quickly.
I won't get into the details, but remember, Marketing Board does not come under the Ministry of Agriculture. And I was shocked when I got into the Ministry of Agriculture that discussion was still going on, that we should bring it back to the Ministry of Agriculture. It's under the Ministry of Finance. And I believe, first of all, there needs to be structural changes. It must go back to its original mandate. I think Marketing Board lost its way. It became a competitor for farmers rather than doing what it was supposed to do, which is assisting in finding markets and bringing in inputs for the sector. I made that point public. I said that publicly, and I welcome the consultations, because at the end of the day, something has to be done about Marketing Board to make it not be so competitive with farmers, and to allow Marketing Board to enhance the agricultural sector rather than to be competing with those who are in the sector. But we can do a further discussion on that later on. But I welcome the consultation, and I hope it results in something better for the country.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Mr. David, I'll get back to you, but I want to get to some closing comments. Dr. Hines, I would begin with you. Closing comments on the conversation we had today. I believe it was a very mature, very intellectually stimulating, very informative and educational discourse. So I want to get over to you for some closing comments, sir.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I thoroughly welcome this kind of conversation. I just want to say in closing that one of the big challenges, if not the foremost challenge we have in our region, is how we conceptualize power, institutional power. And, throughout our post-independence experience, except for the small experiment in Grenada, 79, and one may say perhaps Jamaica during the Manly years, is that we have conceptualized power in narrow terms, in narrow party terms, rather than conceptualize it in larger national and regional terms. And I think if we were to go there and begin to see in larger nationalistic terms, I think it will remove a lot of the obstacles that we have. A lot of people say, well, how can we change this? How can we change? Try to, do this, do that. But I think the conceptualization of all the way in which we conceptualize power, we have to begin where people are, in their workplaces, in the schools, in the universities, in the union halls. That's where I think we have to begin to do the job. I know I sound like an old-time leftist, but like my brother Jomo said, the gaze is always there because the reality doesn't change. Sometimes it looks as though it changes, but then tomorrow, that wall is still there. So I would like to put on the table the question of power. Power, we often take it for granted, but at the end of the day, that institutional power, ability to do things that the ordinary citizen is not able to do, but you're doing it in their name, and often without their consent. We have to go back, and you've just lost the Black Stallion. And I think if we go over his body of work, that brother dealt with the question of power. So that's my closing remarks.
Absolutely, Dr. Hines. Thank you so much. Jomo, over to you.
Well, after that, you can't say anything else. Except to say that I completely endorse what Dr. Hines has said. And to develop just a little further, it was the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire who says that if one is not awestruck by power, he's bound to abuse it. And I think our politicians of the post-independence generation believed that they were God's gift to people, that they were the great ones, not the masses, who had catapulted them to power. They were the ones with all of the solutions in the briefcases. So the people became voting cattle. They were only needed at that time. They became voting cattle. So there was no attempt to train cadre, to build organization of women, of youth, of farmers. And this is why sometimes I'm disappointed when I think about the collapse of the Grenada Revolution, because there was a serious attempt then to build organizations of the people, to build participatory democracy, to build a kind of democracy which Morris Bishop said was not the 5-minute democracy. And so when I think about what Dr. Hines has said, and I think about what Peter said about the importance of bringing people together and to break that tribalism is key, because remember, the liberation movements in Africa in the 70s, Frelimo, Mozambique, MPLA, their PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau, their mantra was, for the nation to emerge and strive, the tribe must die. What we have had in the Caribbean is the triumph of the party over all of the other major institutions. So even now, if you're in church and there's a decision to be made, you think about what my party leader would say. So the party leader has even trumped your belief in God. In the schools, the same thing. So the institutions have been captured by the party. And it goes back to what Bonham used to talk about. Remember back when in 1978, Bonham talked about the paramountcy of the party. And if the party becomes paramount, where is the state? And if the party is paramount and partisan, what happens to the other 50% of the people a lot of times. Because, you know, in this winner take all, one party may have 42% of the nation behind it, voting nation. But the party wins. The governing party wins and locks out the other half. And you know, the Russian poet Yevtushenko says that half of the nation is on a rampage and half is enslaved. And we can't allow for that. We have to break through that and understand that the nation belongs to us. And the people are not just, our people should not just be our brother and our sister, our mom, but all of the people. So if some of us are suffering, then all of us should feel that pain. So I think those are the that's where we need to get back to. We need to get back to foundation, because we have drifted away from it and we are now so consumed by personal aggrandizement and wealth accumulation that we're not thinking about the nation anymore. And this is why they criticize CBI in opposition and they embrace it in power, because everybody's thinking, boy, I could siphon off something here or there or whatever. Or even if I'm not siphoning it, I know I have a chest from which, a war chest from which I could campaign and win another term. Those are my final thoughts.
Jomo Thomas, Dr. Hines, you guys spoke there like true sons of the great Howard University, which both of you attended, I believe. So you can see that Black intellectualism coming to the fore. I love it. That post-colonial, decolonizing rhetoric there. But Mr. David, Honorable Peter David, thank you again, sir. I'm going to go over to you for some closing comments. You need to unmute the mic, sir. Yes.
This morning's conversation reinforced my optimism. You know, it is easy to become pessimistic after what we've gone through. I mean, those of us here who've been in struggle for 50 years or more, where we've tried to change it. Well, I disagree with the view that we've not made progress. I believe we have made progress. I don't believe we have made progress, not as much as we would want to believe, not as much as we could have, Jobo. For example, 1983 was an absolute setback. I agree with you with that. So when you said no attempt at cadre development, I immediately took a note. What about that? Then you went down to acknowledge that there was that. So there were attempts throughout the period to make the changes. I believe that we have to keep going back to the project. I believe we have to stick with the project. I agree with Jomo, which says we have to train new generations. I'm not sure we're doing that. I believe we have to teach them our history. I believe people like Dr. Hines, you have to go back to our history, because somehow, somewhere, it is a view that we have just started. I believe we have to pay tribute to the ancestors who fought. Remember, comrades, that they were coming off of colonialism. So the British had, for example, in our constitutions, I mean, our constitutions, as I said earlier, Jomo, you're not present. They played a trick on us. We accepted a political system that was divisive by its nature. And that is why you were unable in St. Vincent, we were unable in Grenada to make fundamental changes to our political system, which is a challenge we have. How do we do all of what we're doing with a political system that teaches us about Eura NMP and Eura NDC and Eura this, Eura that? In other words, you have no knowledge of the philosophical foundations on which that party is laid. It is just that tribal instinct that we take to the politics. So I believe our intellectuals have a critical role in offering alternatives to us for our development. I believe our political system. I endorse everything said by Jomo and Dr. Hines. I mean, we all speak with the same tongue on that. But what I do believe is that our intellectuals must present. We have to present something to our people that is better. And that is why our people, our families send us to universities so that we could come back with some knowledge as to how to help the society, as Dr. Hines said, to transform. And it will not be transformed simply by us saying it should be transformed. And in the political context, with the political system, the Westminster system, as constructed, because the US started with our Westminster system. We have to make some changes. And the awful thing is that we tried in Grenada, you tried in St. Vincent, Jomo, and we failed. And now we are talking in Grenada about the same issues that we raised in campaign at that time. So, for example, changing of our electoral system. But it was rejected. So in all, Kellen, I want to thank you for the opportunity. You have rekindled my optimism. Speaking to Jomo, speaking to Dr. Hines this morning certainly has caused me to be refreshed. And remember, the tribalism we have is not something we chose. It is something that was imposed on us by the colonial masters. We didn't choose that. It was not in us to do it. But I agree with Jomo and Dr. Hines. We have to change it. So let us try to bring the next generation on board in doing that, and keep optimistic. I have tried all of the political parties, and I continue to try. And next month, next year, until I die, my tombstone should say that I tried. And I know Jomo is doing the same way he sits in St. Vincent. Dr. Hines in Arizona, you do it the same. Let us all try to make, as both of you said, let us keep it.
Peter,
hey, my brother.
I just finished reading a biography on Walter Rodney. I just finished reading it.
Send me who wrote that piece?
Leo Zelig.
Yes, it's good.
And one of the things that Walter Rodney said, I was reminded, I knew it before and I was reminded by it. Walter Rodney says, the thing that he feared most is to become an old man and be walking down the street. In fact, he was celebrating the consistency of CLR James.
Right.
He said the thing that he feared most was to be walking down the street. And as he passed, there were a group of men on the sidewalk who said, there goes Walter Rodney. He used to be a revolutionary.
There we go.
Therein lies my permanent gaze.
Exactly. Our permanent gaze.
Straight ahead.
Different places in different ways, but our permanent gaze.
Straight ahead, my brother.
And on that note, permanent gaze, operative word of the week, permanent gaze. Gentlemen, this was a very, very intellectually stimulating, very enlightening conversation. And as a programming note, I said we did invite the National Democratic Congress to be represented here. Their representative indicated that due to scheduling conflicts, they would not be able to appear. They did give us a commitment. Working with the press secretary, I have to give her credit for responding in quick time and in short order to my emails this week. So I'm giving you credit, Madam Press Secretary, for doing that. That was not the case in the past. So we will be following through on that conversation next week. Gentlemen, thank you again for appearing on the program. Peter, I will be watching the space where you are concerned, and at the next convention, let's see what happens there. Let us see all of the rhetoric that you talk about.
Hope I don't disappoint you.
Well, let's see. All right, gentlemen, viewers and listeners, that was the Honorable Peter David, MP for the town of St. George, Dr. David Hines, political scientist, and Mr. Jomo Sanga Thomas out there, former Speaker of the House of Representatives of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and attorney, as well as he's a political commentator as well. So I want to thank both gentlemen, three gentlemen, and of course our earlier guests for being guests on this week's program. Now, this is an announcement from the Presentation Brothers College in Grenada. It is wrapping up. It is 75th anniversary celebrations, and they will be having a special 75th anniversary closing mass on Friday, 20th January. At 11 a.m. at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, in which Bishop Clyde Martin Harvey would be the chief celebrant. Of course, all past students, past teachers, well-wishers, past parents, current parents, everyone is invited to join the Presentation College school community as it wraps up its 75th anniversary celebration as it brings its 75th anniversary celebration to a close. Again, that's Friday, 20th January at 11 a.m. at the Cathedral in St. George's. Now, on behalf of the viewers and on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, viewers and listeners, I wish to thank you for participating in this program. Again, if you've not caught the program live on social media, you have the opportunities to catch the program on CRFM on Wednesday at 4 p.m., Wednesday at 5 p.m. on GBN TV, and tonight at 8 p.m. on WPG10 across the Caribbean. And so this is where we would end the program today. I'm your humble servant, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a pleasant week. Bye-bye.